Okay, we're live, Graham.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming this morning. Sorry that there's been a slight delay in the start. It wasn't too not as long as I thought it might be, but welcome to the meeting of the Licensing Act Subcommittee. My name is Graham White. I'm a solicitor with Shropshire Council advising the committee if necessary today. The meeting this morning is being live streamed and recorded. A video and an audio of the meeting will be made available on the council's website after the hearing. Right, when I finish speaking, I'll ask the members to introduce themselves and the officers that are present and everybody who's here making representations today. We've asked that when you do speak, you introduce yourself and explain who you are, so anybody who is watching or watches the recording is able to identify who's speaking. Just identifying no reference for the committee, so.
I know my voice is different.
So my next point, to ensure that everybody watching the live stream can hear, then you're asked to switch on the microphone before speaking, so now the members of the committee will be able to do that as well. First of all then...
Sorry, do you have to press that every time you speak?
Yes, and then again when you finish.
Hold it down.
No, press it, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with the members. Councillor Brumall.
I'm Councillor Peter Brumall, Wem Division.
Councillor Gary Burchett, Banking Division.
Councillor Pardee, Sundor.
Thank you. And Mr. Amir.
Licensing Officer Ross O'Neill.
And Mr. Collier could be
I'm Amanda Hogan, the clerk to the panel, taking a note of the proceedings.
Thank you very much. The applicants.
I'm Belinda Griffiths. Sorry, Belinda Griffiths, the applicant.
Thank you. And the
Paul Higgins, neighbour.
And Alison McKeever, Shrewsbury.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda this morning is the election of chairman, so I'll ask the members for nominations for chairman, please.
I'd like to propose Councillor Gary Burchett.
Seconded.
Councillor Burchett.
All in favour? Thank you very much. Right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Licensing Act Subcommittee. I'm Graham, we're going to move it down. Right. The committee has read and considered the representations and evidence submitted by all parties in relation to the application. Therefore, presentations should be succinct and kept to a brief summary of key points. There's no need to read out written representations or reiterate the details of written representations at great length. I will intervene if it is felt that presentations are becoming overly long, are going off track, or do not relate to the application being considered. The procedure for the hearing has been sent to you prior to the hearing. In general, we will aim to keep this to this order of business to ensure timely and fair conduct of the hearing for all parties. If it is felt necessary during the course of the hearing, the committee may make the decision to deviate from the procedure. This is at the committee's discretion. There are opportunities throughout the hearing for each party to ask questions of others following their presentations. Please ensure that you use this opportunity to ask questions only and not to make further points or statements. It is the chair to decide if questions are appropriate and relate to the matter at hand. Any behaviour considered to be disruptive by the chair may lead to parties being muted or asked to leave the meeting. Does anybody have any questions regarding the rules of the hearing? Yeah.
I have one, Chair. I request that I present 3 brief extracts of audio evidence.
Sorry, if somebody's speaking, needs a question mark.
Yeah, I request that I present 3 brief extracts of audio evidence as part of my comments. I don't need any technical support. I have an iPad and speaker.
So,
the objectors, have they got any?
I object because I was under the understanding that you had to present prior to this meeting if you were bringing any new evidence, which I'm not, and I clearly think this is new evidence, so I personally would object.
Then it's up to members then to determine.
If it's not been sent
if it's not been done in advance, then it's not something we can take at the meeting.
I
Any evidence has to be presented before the meeting for people to.
Sure, they can present it, but you've got to be all agreed. So if the takers wants to present it, you agree on the applicant that agrees, then it can be presented.
I'm assuming the applicant doesn't agree.
100% I do not agree.
That's the rule.
Sorry, that's the rule.
That's fine. I just want to make clear I did alert Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, well, obviously you have to alert the applicant.
Yeah, and well, I alerted Mr. O'Neill to the request. So, but I take your decision, thank you.
Yeah, but just to clarify that, Chair, there was an email that he did mention it, and obviously the email back was that I can't make that decision and he'd have to speak to them and obviously explain it that presented before or ask for permission to hear.
Okay, thanks, Ross. So, licensing officer, any of the representations made been withdrawn?
3 representations made and all still outstanding.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so does any party have any evidence not already submitted which they would like to put? You've already said that we can't. We've already said we can't take your evidence on the audio. So, disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have to ask the members. Members are reminded that to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interests. If, following declaration of interest, any party feels a member's decision making may be prejudiced, they should make it known. The hearing may then need to be adjourned for the committee to be reappointed. Have we got any disclosure of pecuniary interests?
No.
And that do I. Okay. Licensing officer, introduce yourself please and present your report.
Good morning all, thank you Chair. So I'm Public Protection Officer Russell Hill, working in the licensing team and responsible for today's report. We're here today to consider a full variation application for Wild Blue Restaurant and Cafe Bar, which is situated at 19 Wild Cup, Shrewsbury, and it's been applied for by Belinda Groups. You'll see that Appendix A and B of the report are a map and photographs that set the scene for yourselves. So 19 Wild Cup is situated in the town centre of Shrewsbury and is surrounded by both residential and commercial properties. Premises currently holds a premises licence in the rear garden area for supply of alcohol served for meal or as ancillary item before and or after a meal, Monday and Tuesday, midday till 4:30, and Wednesday to Sunday, midday till 7:30. The premises closes 30 minutes after sale and it's currently limited to 6 months only a year. Again, Appendix C and D of the report are the current licence and current plan. So today's application is to permit supply of alcohol externally for an additional 6 months here, totaling the whole year of 12 months. To extend the licensable area from outside to inside, so it would include both the inside and outside area at 19 Wild Cup. To also add outside to condition 9, public nuisance in relation to alcohol and ancillary to the meal, and also add internal to condition 5 within crime and disorder to extend the CCTV coverage from externally to both external and internal. The open areas / sales externally to stay the same. Please note there is a typo error on my report in section paragraph 6.3. It references outdoor sale times. That is an admin error. The applicant is only applying for the same times, so please ignore that section of my report. So just to repeat, the same times outside currently to remain. The applicant just wants to apply for an additional 6 months. Appendix D and F are the application and proposed plan in full submitted by the applicant. So during consultation, representations were received of Environmental Protection who were concerned about the potential noise. Conditions proposed and they put nuisance conditions with agreed with the applicant as per paragraph 7 of my report. There was also comments only of planning, which again is in the report, and there is no outstanding representations from any authorities. However, there were 3 other persons' representations submitted. Although I'm not entirely linked to the 4 licence objectives, there is concern of noise, hours, and 6 to 12 months external extension, and they will be found at Appendix G, which is a map of the residents, and then H to J, the copies of the representations. Representations, as per the licensing guidance 182, are accepted, giving the benefit of the doubt to the person submitting representations. The applicant responded to the representations during the 20 working days. You'll also find those at Appendix K to M, the report. And then also since submitting the report and the agenda, further supporting information has been provided of the applicants and one of the objectors. These are available within the agenda separately for yourselves to see. So to clarify, there's a current premises licence for 6 months in the garden at 19 Wild Cup. The applications to extend to 12 months and to extend inside the premises with additional hours inside. There's also an application also asks for extension New Year Eve times to apply for the non-standard timings. So what we're here today is to consider an understanding application, and to do this you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to grant the 4 licence objectives. any representations and supporting information that you've seen, the 182 guidance, the Licensing Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's Licensing Policy 2019 to 2024. You then may refuse to grant the application, or you can grant the application with or without conditions, in full or in part. Your decision must be justified and provide supporting evidence after to all parties involved, and a decision can be appealed within 21 days of persons receiving the notice. That's it for me, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, have you any questions for the licence officer?
Yes, please. I'd like to just ask a few questions, if that's all right. Ross, thanks for your report. You state in it that it's not for a cafe restaurant. You call it something like sui generis. What is that?
That's the comments made by planning, so that's a separate entity. So what planning have come back and said is that there's two elements of planning. So you've got cafe/restaurant is part of it, and then you've also got drinking establishment, sui generis. So the way they've worded it, and my understanding, I'm not a planning officer, but the way I understand it is that if you have a cafe/restaurant, it should be food, and then alcohol is ancillary to food. While sui generis, or the drink establishment side, is when people can go and have a drink inside premises without having a meal. But like I say, that's my understanding of their representation or comments. I'm not a planning officer.
Thank you. Now, in the application form, it makes outdated reference to the use classes, which was superseded in September 20, and sui generis doesn't appear therefore, and it says it wants to go from A1 to class A3, so those categories.
Can I make one point? We're here as the licensing committee to determine a licensing application. Any other decisions are planning decisions, which are totally separate applications, nothing to do with this committee whatsoever. We're here solely to determine a change of use to the licence, not to any planning decisions.
I'm looking at the licence application form, and it says A1 to A3, so those classes are outdated. But if it's my understanding that if we were going to use the old classes, it would be A4, not A1 to A3, because A3 is a cafe restaurant, and you say in your report that this is not a cafe restaurant. Is that right?
Again, I'm not a planning officer, so I'll echo what the chair's just said. With the application says for the four conditions, the objectives, comments made by planner is a separate entity, so it's for them to assess whether or not they've got the correct planning permission of what they can do. We're here for the four licence objectives, but the alcohol and entertainment. So any comments that have been made on the report, but that word to word, the comments are made are the planning officer's comments. That's not my words.
Okay.
Just to clarify before we go further, if we grant the decision today, the applicant still have to go and apply for a change of use for planning law, which is a totally separate application, nothing to do with this committee whatsoever.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually looking at the application form for today.
Right.
Now, in the application form, there are 4 statements which say it's going to be a cafe restaurant. And Mrs. Griffiths, in response to the representations, asserts that as well. So are those 14 statements, are they wrong? Are they statements of fact which are wrong?
You'd have to tell me which parts you're looking at, because
well, where it says the applicant is planning to refurbish the inside of 91 Cup to allow the business to operate as a cafe restaurant 12 months of the year. Wild Blue Restaurant Cafe, Wild Blue Cafe Restaurant. Wild Blue will predominantly operate as a cafe restaurant. And then these are the comments for the representations. My establishment will be an upmarket tapas cafe restaurant. I'm in fact trying to create an upmarket tapas cafe restaurant ×2. My aim is to create an upmarket tapas cafe restaurant, my restaurant cafe. Actually, she creates and uses the term cafe restaurant in response to representations 10 times, 6 times to me, twice to Mrs.
Sorry, I don't get what the point is.
Sorry,
the point
Chair.
is about the licensing rule. All we're here to determine is whether they can change the licence. We're not here to determine any wording or any documents that relate to planning.
Chair,
in any way, shape or form.
what I'm trying to drive at is...
let me just stop you.
Yeah, sure.
What you're referring to is the application and representations received back. That's not part of my report.
No.
So you'll get a chance to talk about that when it's your opportunity to talk. That's part of the applicants, that's what their words are, that's not my words.
But in
That's the
your report,
application.
you did state that it's not a cafe restaurant.
That's the planning's words.
Yeah, but
The
well-
report states,
Okay,
and we're not here, whether it's a cafe restaurant, as the chair said, if there is concerns over planning and they haven't got the right use of planning, you, by all means, you can take that up with planning and make sure they get the right use. It's not
That's a
something that
separate decision for a separate committee.
so I'll ask this question, finally then. Because the implication for this is clearly under the risks. The applicant says that under the licensing objectives, there are no further risks. That might well be for a cafe restaurant, but this is a bar drinking establishment with
Again,
food.
this is,
Do you think it poses no further risks?
it's questions for me for my reports. You're asking me questions on the application, and I'm not here to answer questions, unfortunately. I've put in the facts to the committee, and the discussions you can have with the committee members, and that's them.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so can we move on? Okay, any further questions on the licence officer's report?
Yes,
Does-
I
does it
think
do-
that the final question is, it appears to me that the application is fundamentally misleading about what it is and what it's seeking to do. It's stating one thing and actually it's seeking another. Would you think that was fair account?
Again, that's the application that's come in, and that's the reason that you put representations in for you to amplify your thoughts today,
Okay,
not for me to answer what my thoughts are on it. The application has been accepted, as we wouldn't be here today, so the application's been accepted, it's gone through consultation. But from a licensing point of view, what they've got an application related to planning, we're two separate entities, and planning have decided to make comments only. They've decided not to put representations in, and they're not sat in the room today. I'm not a planning officer, I've got a little knowledge from speaking to them. So if there is concerns about planning and what the restaurant is trying to do, if it's a drinking establishment or a premises, that's something you have to take up with them, I'm afraid.
would you agree that there's so many statements of fact which are
I think
incorrect?
we've had enough on that particular point there.
Okay.
So applicants, have you any questions on the officer's report? Okay, in that case then, can you present your case, please? Sorry, committee, have you any questions? for the officer?
Can I just say something? Ross, sorry, Ross, you mentioned a typographical error in the report, 6.3, I think you said. I just want to make sure I'm clear which bit it is that you are referring to. Is it, you mentioned outside shouldn't be there. Is that the third bullet point in 6.3?
Yeah, so the supply of alcohol on sales, we're indoors Monday to Sunday, 11 till 2300, and outdoors Monday to Tuesday, 10:30 in the morning till 5, and Wednesday to Sunday, 10:30 till 8. But when I did my notes last night, I realised that the applicant doesn't want to change the current hours, so that outdoor hours, there's additional hours in my report that shouldn't be there.
Right, okay, thank you.
So what should it read then, the outdoor hours?
Let me just go back to the application, I think it's noon.
Noon till 7:30, Wednesday to Sunday.
Yes, I believe they start at noon each day, so outside should say noon rather than the 10:30.
Okay, so whatever decision we make today will be based on noon.
Yeah, not my report on the actual application.
Yeah,
Apologies for that.
Okay, happy with that. Right, applicant.
Okay. I would like to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself and my businesses and reconfirm and assure the council, committee and chair that as a proprietor and licence holder, I will continue to uphold and adhere to the licensing objectives set out. I live above the shop, and above I live above the shop.
Sorry, can you put your mic on?
Was it not on?
The right hand button.
Okay. Sorry, I live above the shop and I'm very much part of the local community. With this in mind, the decision to apply for the variation to our current licence to remove the ancillary conditions of food being served and extension to our hours and boundary has not been taken lightly. I am both the owner of Wild Blue World, the Blue Bar, and Jungle Land in Telford, which is a indoor soft play centre with 100,000 visitors a year. My award-winning business is in its 6th year and has continued to trade throughout very challenging times. Following the devastation impact of COVID, I created Blue Bar and a garden on my property in order to encourage footfall through the shop and increase much needed revenue. This has become an overwhelming success and a popular destination for both locals and tourists. Unfortunately, continued challenges making operating a small independent retail shop a less viable proposition. It is for this reason that I am hoping that you will accept my application to vary my licence to allow my business to diversify from a shop to a cafe, restaurant, bar. After reading the letters of representation, it has become apparent that there is a misunderstanding around the concept of my business. I am not and will not be looking to create a late night establishment, and it is not what I am applying for. It is my intention to create an indoor upmarket cafe, restaurant, bar operating as an extension to the garden, outside courtyard garden, house garden. The concept of the indoor restaurant will mirror that of the garden. I also feel it's important to acknowledge that on 2 separate occasions in 3 years, I have contravened my licensing conditions. For that, again, I would like to sincerely apologise and reiterate that I worked with all parties involved to react, cooperate and solve these issues immediately. Since then, these 2 isolated incidents, there has never been no reoccurrences. In retrospect, naming my alfresco garden the Blue Bar was a big mistake. The very nature of the name implies it's a bar. Therefore, I will be changing the name from this year from the Blue Bar to the Secret Garden at Wild Blue to avoid this misconception happening in the future. Finally, I'd like to say I've tried my utmost to be accommodating at every step of the process and work with the appropriate authorities and neighbours. I am sure you are all aware that the validity of my application rests upon my ability to ensure the licensing objectives are upheld. And I stand here today as a businesswoman with experience, 100% confidence that as the proprietor and the licence holder, I will continue to adhere to the licensing objectives at all times. Thank you for considering my application for variation to the premises licence.
Okay, thank you. Licence officer, have you any questions?
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Representations, any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Party?
Thank you.
Sorry, we're going to go again.
Thank you. The licensing officer mentioned that he made a mistake with the hours of opening. Did you notice that in the report?
Yeah,
You haven't seen the report? Right, okay, that's fine, thank you.
Councillor Moore? Sister? Okay, we'll hear from the other persons then. You may make your representations.
Okay. I'm Alison McNeil, I'm a town resident. Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can you turn your microphone on, please? Can you turn yours on the right hand button?
Yeah, is that all?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Thank you. Chair, I'm here to ask that the committee retain the meal condition and keep hours for the premises indoors the same as those already decided for outdoors. I ask the committee to remember that this is a site of particular character, which has in the past been a haven of peace in a busy town, not only enabling residents to enjoy their gardens in relative quiet, but also supporting the birds, the bats and the other wildlife. I'd like to take the points in my representation and Mrs Griffiths' responses to them in order. So number 1, noise pollution in what is an already congested area of pubs and restaurants. Mrs Griffiths says she is creating what is primarily a restaurant. If the proposal is for a restaurant, why does Mrs Griffiths wish to remove the meal condition? By doing so, she creates not a cafe restaurant, but a bar drinking establishment, serving food, a completely different category of use. A bar restaurant is indeed a very different thing from a cafe restaurant, and it attracts a different clientele. This difference is particularly noticeable later in the evening, when people come in solely to drink, and the atmosphere can then change significantly. A bar drinking establishment increases the amount of alcohol consumed on the premises. Drinking alcohol without food increases the rate at which alcohol is absorbed into the body, which has a more rapid effect on judgment and behaviour. These factors will raise the risk of noise and other disturbance which relates to the licensing objective public nuisance. As customers go outside to smoke or for any other reason, this leads me to the second point. The environmental and noise pollution for smokers and others congregating in an area surrounded by dwellings. Mrs. Griffiths says smokers will be prohibited from taking their drinks outside, which will stop smokers congregating outside and keeping noise to a minimum. Since when has not holding a drink ever stopped smokers from going outside to have a cigarette? She then contradicts herself and her assurance by going on to say, should the variation be approved, customers will use the facilities of an outdoor toilet and smoking area. So far from stopping smokers going outside, she proposes an outdoor area for them. The proprietor is to build an outside toilet, which will add another reason for people to go outside. Far from preventing customers from going outside, they will have to go outside to go to the toilet and smoke. Mrs. Griffiths says the rear door to the building will be closed at 8 o'clock until the end of trading, except for access and egress. In other words, the door to the courtyard area will be shut, except whenever anyone wants to go in or out. It is clearly not the case that she can stop. That is, completely prevent smokers or anyone else from going outside for any reason during all the hours of opening of the indoor bar. That is from 10 o'clock, I believe, but now noon, until 11:30 p.m. People who have been drinking inside without food will be able to move around the outdoor areas whenever they wish, something which is more likely in the summer months. I'm simply referring to smokers. I'm talking about anyone. I'm not simply referring to smokers. I'm talking about anyone who has had a drink without food from the indoor bar. Any indoor drinker will be able to access the outdoor areas during the day when the gate to the upper terrace and the door to the courtyard will be open. This will change the customer profile and nature of the outdoor site to something akin to what planning has repeatedly refused naming a mixed-use bar restaurant. What is more, allowing anyone out into the courtyard area after 8 o'clock at night is currently a breach of planning condition 3, decision 22/2186, VAR. There is no prohibition and no effective measure proposed to stop people who have been drinking without food indoors from going outside at any time the premises are open. Point 3, customers congregating in front of the premises, which is on a very busy road with potential dangers to moving cars and pedestrians. Mrs. Griffiths says on this, due to the default booking system, we will be able to stagger leaving customers, and due to our proposed limit on guests, we will not have large groups of people leaving the premises at any one time. Is this the same default booking system, which involves, and I quote, walk-ins always welcome, as shown in Facebook advert, included in the evidence for this hearing? In fact, her application explicitly proposes non-reserved walk-in guests who may just want a drink without food. In conclusion, the assurances Mrs. Griffiths gives are unconvincing and at times contradictory. The measures she proposes for controlling noise and external access do not make sense and will not work. Should the hours be extended in this way, noise pollution and disturbance could occur from this site up to at least 11:30 p.m. If a mixed-use bar drinking establishment is created, some of the customers will be drinkers who have not had food, increasing the risk of noise and disturbance. The effect of allowing a bar drinking establishment inside will be felt outside, changing the nature and atmosphere of the site as a whole. It is very difficult. The Development Management Report 22nd/00228 full states, it is very difficult to control the noise generated by people talking, particularly when they have been drinking. 413. I ask that you retain the meal condition for the internal area to avoid people drinking without food and so raising the risk of more noise and disturbance when they go outside. I ask that you keep the hours of the indoor area consistent with those previously determined for the outdoor areas, so the outdoor areas remain completely clear of customers from 8 p.m. in the evening, as stipulated in Planning Conditions 3/22/02186 bar. Finally, I also ask that you consult with planning to avoid any breach or conflict in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Licence officer, questions?
No questions, Chair.
Applicant, any questions?
If I the questions, then we'll, sorry. I'm not unsure whether, because I don't agree with what's being said, that's not a question. So,
Yeah, you can't just, you've got a point you want to raise, any rebuttals you want to give towards the comments being made.
so it's not defending those comments. So if, say,
For example, the vote to the garden, how you ensure that nobody goes to the garden at 8 o'clock?
right, okay. So we will have a manager there all the time. The restaurant is very small, and I will have signage and I will have management there. You cannot take your drinks outside. You can use the toilet, but after 8 o'clock, you absolutely cannot take the drinks outside. You can use the toilet.
Just to confirm that the toilet in the garden is the only toilet on the
No, there's one inside.
So why don't you stop the door then?
I can, but it's only one toilet. So that is maybe a condition that can be put in, but I only have one. At the moment, I thought it would be an advantage to offer an extra toilet. The toilet has not been installed. I've got full plan permission for it. That's been approved. But I haven't started that work because I wanted to see what happened today. But I put the toilet in for one baby changing facilities and an extra toilet. So, so that's my point on taking drinks out. Smokers, I wouldn't want smokers to go out the front on the pavement, so there will be a designated area, small area, that they cannot take drinks out. And I put in my comments that the area, how high is the wall? Just look. It's
Not
twice,
sure exactly how high,
it's
but-
twice the height of this ceiling before any residence. So no, if that's all, if a wall's a courtyard with a wall twice the size of this, for smoke to put on the pollution side. As far as going out onto the main road, it is a restaurant. When this confusion of you're a bar, I've gone to a restaurant, and if I am meeting somebody, I've had a glass of wine before that person arrives. It is a restaurant. It will be a cafe during the day that will serve alcohol, but it's a restaurant. I'm not doing any cheap bargain booze. We're not having draft beer. I don't know how to stress.
I would also add that everything that Glenda's saying is within our responses and has been in the
So
additional.
I'm just going over what
And
I've-
and in the additional information that we've already provided, so I don't want her to repeat herself. I think we were told not to
So
do that.
this
So the response is
our next statement, it's just answer
Yeah.
questions
Yeah, I'm
regarding.
just answering, but I feel I've already written notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so I'm trying to verbally say it, not very
Yeah,
well.
that's fine. I think we've
I feel
got
I
the
actually
gist of what you're going to say.
written them.
Committee members, any questions?
Just one. Residential areas, obviously there's people living in flats over and above these shops. Other than that, the sort of self-contained residential areas, are they the ones that are on Dogpole? Are they the nearest ones? Right, thank you.
Councillor,
Sorry.
Chair, I just got a question.
Just a second. Yeah, briefly, yeah.
Yeah, I was informed that actually once a presentation has been made, it was questions only. I didn't realise that there was be an opportunity for another presentation.
I allowed a little bit of leeway in that one.
Yeah, but
Okay,
can I just say that I think that, you know, you were very correct to make sure I was asking questions, and I just think that to allow that, it actually conflicts with the advice that I had earlier before the meeting.
Okay, point taken. Sister, any questions? Thank you. Okay, licence officer, do you understand what, please?
I got it. Yeah,
I thought you'd already, my apologies. Okay, go ahead.
thank you.
Yeah.
I am here to make a negative request. I'm here to ask the committee not to add a particular word to the existing licence. The word is outside. Currently, the premises have a meal condition and ancillary for drinking alcohol. The proposal is to limit that to outside, creating not a cafe restaurant, but a mixed-use bar restaurant indoors. I want to be clear, it cannot be a cafe restaurant if it's in the sui generis category, as stated. It can only ever be a bar drinking establishment that serves food. That means that there are statements of fact in the application form which are wrong. That single word creates a change which is so significant that it needs its own category. That's why it's sui generis, of its own type, and has to be treated separately. It is, as the officer says in his report, sui generis. It needs its own planning decision, as you've said, Chair. In fact, planning has refused a similar sui generis application with the same hours for hours outdoors and for the sui generis application already. That's additional evidence 1. On the question of hours, if the hours stipulated in this application for the indoor space are passed unchanged, then there'll be a conflict with the planning condition 3 outdoors, as Mrs. McKeever has so clearly outlined. Giving customers the discretion to enter and use the courtyard area 3.5 hours in excess of the limit imposed by planning. This, in my view, is far too much. Mrs. Griffiths talks of an upmarket tapas cafe restaurant, but we've seen that this application is not about a cafe restaurant, but a bar drinking establishment that serves food. In fact, if this application is passed, far from being predominantly a cafe restaurant, it can never be a cafe restaurant because it will always be in a different category and a different entity. The meal condition with ancillary has a great deal of flexibility in serving alcohol, for instance, before a meal. The example that Mrs. Griffith just gave about having a drink before a meal, that's covered by the ancillary and wouldn't be prohibited. But the tapas concept, which Mrs. Griffiths favours, offers a distinctive and added degree of flexibility because you don't have to have a whole meal. Drinkers would be able to order a relatively small amount of food in this style of restaurant, and the condition, unchanged as it currently stands, would be met. However, if you simply add the word outside, drinkers could consume alcohol without food all day, every day, creating an increased risk in relation to the licensing objectives such as public nuisance. Mrs. McKeever has said drinking alcohol without food increases the rate at which alcohol is absorbed into the body, affecting judgment, behaviour and mood. I think it is reasonable to state that the addition of this word outside raises the risk of public nuisance and other licensing objectives across the premises, because drinkers might not be allowed to carry drinks outside, but they themselves will go outside with the drinks inside them, all of which raises the risk of antisocial behaviour. Mrs. Griffith states that she has had certainly no antisocial behaviour of any kind. I've included a transcript of an event, a private party on the 20th of September 2021. You may have missed it. I've asked to present audio evidence of it. That has been denied. I would like to turn to that transcript. It's at the end of my representation in Appendix H. won't read it out, but if you could just take a few moments to look at that transcript. I think we can all agree, I hope, that that behaviour is antisocial. It happened on this site, adjacent to gardens and bedrooms of neighbouring properties. It happened in the early hours of the morning. It happened on licensed premises. And it is a breach of licence conditions. Mrs. Griffiths says she takes full responsibility for it. She says she didn't know she couldn't have a private party on licensed premises till 2 in the morning. The second incident took place just over a month earlier. It was a live music event. Again, I've asked to present the audio evidence, but that's been denied. Now, this was a breach of planning because of the volume. It was also relates to public nuisance. In regard to this event, Mrs. Griffiths and the EPO and the licensing team all referred to an acoustic event, but the acoustic guitar was amplified with a pickup, which acts to increase volume in a similar way to an electric guitar. In the previous licensing hearing, Mrs. Griffiths had given assurances that the playing of music would be background and ambient only. That's in additional evidence, point 2. She states, I don't want loud music playing, it's just purely about background music and its ambience and about people being able to talk. I will stop using the pizza oven, it's my intention to replace this. I'll stop using the pizza oven, it's my intention to replace this with a griddle. I'll be operating the Blue Bar with an online and in-store booking system. If you refer again to the additional evidence, the advert on the Wild Blue World Facebook page.
Pause it for a second, Mr. Sorry.
But this just seems like repeating stuff that.
No,
He's allowed to make a statement saying that you were sorry. Okay.
So, if we look at I'd just like to turn to the additional
Well, we did say to you
evidence.
at the beginning, you could make, we've all read the submissions already in detail, so we don't need the whole transcript read again. So
I'm not
make-
proposing to do that. All I'm saying is that shows that an advert on the 21st of August, which advertised a live event in contradiction of the previous assurances, which were written into the Blue Bar final decision 5 days later. And it also contradicts the pizza nights and the online booking system. Mrs. Griffiths, in my suggestion that I said that neighbours called the police, states it was Mr. Higgins that called the police. When I contacted the police the following day, they had noted Mr. Higgins' complaint. Both of these statements of fact are false, and I need to record that for the hearing. I did not contact the police that night, or any night, about noise from the premises. My itemised telephone data records for this period show I made no calls and sent no text messages from my mobile that day, nor any calls from my landline. It's also shown by the response to subject access request lodged at Worcester Town Hall, West Mercia Police. They confirmed that there is no record of a complaint from me that night. I also received messages that night, which I responded to. I did send one message. The thread contains the messages. They called the police. We have just called the police. It was so noisy. I can read out my response to that if you wish, but basically it just describes what I did that night, which was to make some recordings with and also measure the sound with a PCE sound monitor. In an attempt to isolate me as the sole complainant and to undermine my representation to this hearing and my reputation as a whole, Mrs. Griffiths has made 2 false statements of fact, one implicating the police. She has stated something that did not happen. It was Mr. Higgins that called the police, and it's all been circulated in documentation for this meeting, and also something that could never have happened. When I contacted the police the following day, they had noted Mrs. Higgins' complaint. The police confirmed they have no record of a complaint from me. That's because I didn't make one. These statements have been written and circulated in connection with a hearing for a licence application variation. Paragraph 158 of the Licensing Act states that it's an offence for an applicant to make a false statement in or in connection with an application or its variation. That clause is in bold capitals at the end of every application form. In closing my comments, I ask the committee this. Should the committee be considering an application that is supported by untrue statements, of fact from the applicant, one of which implicates the police. The application SC 2202-175 applies for something, a bar drinking establishment, which it calls something else, a cafe restaurant. It makes a series of statements of fact which are untrue. It makes reference to defunct use classes. It is wrong and misleading, not in a minor detail, but in the very category of establishment it is applying for. Consequently, it fails to address sufficiently increased risks under the crucial questions of the licensing objectives. Mrs. Griffiths makes multiple statements of fact which are untrue in connection with it, one implicating the police. Shropshire Council licensing policy 33.2 and 33.3 should be applied. The application should be rejected and returned to the applicant, and only considered when all of these fundamental flaws and the breach of the Licensing Act 2003, paragraph 158, have been sufficiently and correctly addressed. Thank you.
Okay. Licensing officer, any comments? Any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Applicant, any questions directly related to what Mr. Higgins just said?
Question, not phone. Question.
Any questions on what Mr. Higgins always just said?
No.
It might help. It is an opportunity to ask questions on what he said, but there is an opportunity to sum up at the end if you want to respond to anything that's been raised.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Katie? No? Right, we'll just take one scroll a bit. Okay, the licensing officer, would you like to sum up, please?
Just to clarify a few points, Chair, from what's been said, that my report versus how it's written. So to clarify, in section 7.2, paragraph 7.2, that is in my report, that is comments made by a planning officer.
Yep.
The first paragraph is my words, the rest of it is the planning officer's. So just for you to, when you do consider this application, you need to know that that's not my words. I'm not a planning officer. That's what the planning officer said. In relation to those comments, any activity that's going on from a planning point of view that is a breach and they get complaints, or so they've got their own process and their own officers. If a licence and condition is added to that condition, so what's been mentioned about the outside, if that condition is removed, at the minute they've got a condition that states food ancillary to the meal full stop.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means, the bay licence outside, removing that condition obviously would allow that food to still be taken outside with meals, but inside it would allow drinks inside the premises without food. However, as been mentioned, you've then got the planning issue. That's not a licensing issue, and if that condition stays as application, as any breaches, it will be a planning breach, unless the committee believe that that condition should get the licence because you believe it's a condition that would prevent a noise disturbance, as the representations have mentioned. There's also comments of Mr. McKeever in relation to the noise, smoke in rear. Again, I just want to point you to section 7.1 of the report. So again, those bullet points and conditions are what the professional officer for environmental protection has put forward, and then they've removed their representation because they're conditions they believe that will prevent a noise disturbance from happening.
Okay.
Okay. And then I just need to obviously clarify again, just talk you through, and again, there's obviously points that's been mentioned on violates the Licensing Act and the policy. Again, that's for you to obviously note and be aware of, and to make sure you look at those conditions and sections of those acts from Mr. Higgins' report. So just want to again emphasise why you're here today. So you're here today to consider and determine this application. To do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to further the four licence objectives. Any representations and supporting information you've seen, the 182 guidance, the Licensing Act 2003, and Shropshire Council's Licensing Policy 2019-2024. You then may refuse to grant the licence for the application, or grant the application with or without conditions in full or in part. And then your decision must be justified and provide support and evidence after to all involved parties. And this decision can be appealed within 21 days by all persons here present today and anyone else with representations of that notice. That's it for me, Judge.
Applicant. So, let's say the closing officer, other persons first.
Yes, So, my closing statement is that I do not object to the extension of the licence indoors. I do not object to an indoor tapas-style cafe restaurant. I do object to the removal of the meal condition and ancillary, which would create a bar restaurant. I reject allowing this establishment to serve alcohol without food, as that development would increase risks under the licensing objectives. I do object to the extension of hours indoors to 11:30 p.m. every day, since it would mean that customers, some of whom could have had alcohol with no food, go outside beyond the time stipulated by planning and possibly disturb adjacent dwellings and gardens, when residents could reasonably expect to enjoy some peace and quiet. I would like the opening hours already in place for outdoors to be maintained indoors in order to ensure, one, a joined up approach between planning and licensing, and two, consistent and coherent practice across the whole premises. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my comments on this application.
Stevens?
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee will know that the Section 182 guidance which accompanies the Licensing Act 2003 was updated to reference the agent of change principle, meaning those bringing about a change take responsibility for its impact. Impact is felt in relation to hours of opening. The longer the hours, the greater the impact. Please ensure the hours of opening indoors match those outdoors, so there is no conflict with planning condition 3. For Annex 2, Clause 9, please keep things as they are for the premises as a whole. Please do not add the word outside to that clause. This trigger for the change in category of use. That simple measure will protect nearby residents and the premises and customers themselves from increased risks under the licensing objectives, particularly public nuisance and crime and disorder. That is the power the word outside holds here, and that is the impact you can have by withholding it. Thank you.
Applicant?
Okay, I would just like to,
Microphone, please.
put at this point, if it's okay to respond to the point that, that you
You can
mentioned.
sum up your points.
I-
We're not going to go back over it all. You can sum up.
Can I defend that
Yeah.
bit? I want to defend that one comment about, I was genuinely confused because licensing and planning said two separate things about music on the premises. It was an acoustic guitar, and yes, it was amplified. It started at 7 and it ended at, the whole evening ended at 10 o'clock, and there were tickets that were sold for the event. The police were contacted. I was contacted by public nuisance Rob the following day, and said that you shouldn't be doing this. I apologised. I did contact the police and said, do you want to come out? Do you want to see the premises? They were like, they didn't come out that night. They didn't want to follow it up. It has never happened since. It will not. I realise now that I can't have live music. I'll never be able to have live music. So it is just background. I did make a mistake and have apologised. So that's my point on that. And I just want to say that I have been in the hospitality business for over 31 years, and I will endeavour to utilise, again, my, if you've made a mistake, but utilise my experience and knowledge gained. I hope with my statement that you've all read prior to this meeting, and my responses to each representation, I hope that I have dismissed concerns and proven that I am capable of upholding the license objectives. It's always been my personal objective to work with my neighbours, the business community, and in particular Shrewsbury, to promote independent businesses to boost the local economy. If this variation is not approved, the fact remains my business as it stands, sadly, is no longer viable, and ultimately the shop and the secret garden would have to close, leaving another empty high street building. If this variation is approved, I am granted the permission to diversify and develop my business. I am positive that the Wild Blue restaurant and secret garden will thrive, employing a team of 15 full and part-time staff, and will become an asset to our beautiful town of Shrewsbury. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Solicitor, any points to clarify?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Right, in that case then, I'm going to ask you to withdraw while we deliberate on your first something else. We'll go back in as soon as we're finished deliberating.
Sorry, Chairman, we'll